everybody
going to that?
in class as well as online to day 4, the 14th. So far, we have been introduced to organic egg by Carmen Fernholz. We had a couple days of best practices in marketing with John Bovey and Tim Ennis the last couple days. If those days were a little bit short on details about financial competitiveness of organic production, we're going to be working in future presentations to really kind of drum that up and address those questions, comparing organic and conventional, basically bottom line, taking into account processes and cost of production and whatnot. So that is where we've been, and today what we're going to be talking about is covering transition to organic, how to transition, how to certify, and how to keep that certification. And this is also hopefully going to address some of those initial concerns that we all have about what is perceived as being a lot of work, a lot of paperwork, a lot of time. And those are concerns that I know I had before I had to go through my first couple inspections and certification processes. But today we have a great expert that's going to be able to talk to us and work us through some of that paperwork and to be able to hopefully debase some of those fears and support you and your ability to be able to move on and get certified if that's something that you'll eventually want to do. And so today we have Harriet Behar from Moses, which is Midwest Organic and Sustainable Education Service, which I'm guessing most of you are familiar with. And if not, it's an incredible organization based on the Cross that does education and advocacy. Spring Valley, technically, thank you, Harriet. Spring Valley. And they also put on one of the best conferences / rowdy parties in the country for organic farming.
In the known universe.
In the known universe. Larger.
For the organic.
And that's coming up on February 25th, February 27th. So something you're interested in, you can check their website out. I'll make that information available. So Harriet has 16 years experience as an organic inspector. She also has 30 plus years as an organic grower herself. And she currently is working on the National Organic and National Sustainable Agriculture Coalitions and is the Senior Organic Specialist for Moses. So she is their resident expert that drops knowledge bombs on all kinds of things everywhere. So that is Harriet, and I will now give her the floor.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you through transitioning and also organic certification requirements. And it's really not as scary as you might think. If you do go to that website, amsusda.gov/NOP, it might look scarier because a lot of the rules are written in legalese, but there are very practical reasons and activities behind that legal language, and that's what I'm going to go through right now. If I can figure out how to hit the button. There, okay, I got it. So, just to make it clear, organic is a production claim. It's not about what it does and does not contain. A lot of people think that organic is based on somebody coming out and testing your plants or testing your soil, looking for residues of chemical fertilizers or pesticides. That is not what it's about. It's a systems-based approach, and it's a certification based on a method of production. We don't make any claims that organic food, at least at the USDA level, that it's safer or has higher nutrition or any of those things. We do talk about the environmental benefits of not using toxic materials on the land, but it's not a food safety and it's not a content claim. So if you think the inspector is coming out and going to test your soil looking for residues, that is not what they're going to do. See if I can figure out how to use a map. There we go. So how is it different from conventional agriculture? We don't rely really on petroleum or chemically based fertility, pest control, or weed control inputs. We work with natural sources of fertility, which can be slower releasing, so you have to have your systems in place that can deal with that sort of thing. There's not a lot of highly soluble fertility inputs that are used. Naturally mined rock powders are going to take a longer time to pass on those nutrients to your plant roots than things that are in solution. But of course, using plant materials as well as animal manures. in organic is a kind of a foundation of that recycling of nutrients. We look at using methods for pest and weed control rather than inputs. So crop rotation, natural beneficial insect enemies, having lots of field borders, that sort of thing is really very helpful. Timely cultivation, and there's nothing like being timely in organic, and in even other newer technologies like the rolled rye for organic no-till. So I know there's been some discussion about yield reduction during the transition years, but both here and in Minnesota and Iowa and Illinois, once the farmer learns the organic system, and especially if you're coming from land that has been managed conventionally, you need to build up a reserve of soil biological life, because so much of organic is based in having a vibrant diversity of soil microbes so you have beneficial fungi and beneficial nematodes, beneficial bacteria, and all of those help transfer nutrients to the crop, help build aggregates, so if there's a heavy rain, you don't get compaction as readily, you don't have washing as readily, and all of that is based also in that soil biology. It's like the glue that's holding things together. And a lot of that biology, unfortunately, in conventional systems that use petroleum and chemical-based inputs, that biology has been decreased significantly. So to bring that back could take anywhere from 3 to 7 years. You can accelerate it through the use of cover cropping and even adding in beneficial bacteria to the soil. But once the farmer learns an organic system, so it's not just the land, it's also the farmer. And as with all farming, farming is routine. Any of you that are farmers or grew up on a farm, right? You just know what you got to do in the morning, you know what you got to do in early spring, you know what you got to do in midsummer. Organic is just its own routine. And once you learn that routine, you're on your way. It's really not rocket science. It's just looking at the farm system a little bit differently and having different activities that you do on the farm. And then also too, even here at Arlington, the organic seed that is grown in their trials is statistically equal in yield to the highest yielding GMO seeds grown on conventional land. So that the last yield trial report that came out, I think the organic yield potential was like 220, 225, and the highest in the conventional GMO system was like 230. So we have that potential as long as we are following, the right organic. Press it harder. If you have a highly functioning organic system, and I've been places, especially in Iowa, where organic farmers have been farming 20, 25 years, that land has been organic, and they are beating the county average. Sometimes they have the highest yield in that county with organic agriculture. But it takes a while to get there. So this is what I just said. Organic is a new routine. It's not necessarily any different or more it's different, but it's not more difficult than non-organic production. But you will be more involved. It's not a cookie cutter approach. You don't do the same crop rotations in every field. You don't use the same fertility inputs in every field. You may do contour stripping on one field, and if you've got a flat bottom land, you might, have just different rotations. You're paying more attention to the ecosystem that you're working with, because you're not kind of superimposing a production system on what you already have. You're trying to look at what you're starting with and work with that baseline of a production ecosystem that you have there. So understanding your soil types, knowing what your fertility is, and organic is much more than NPK. You need to be knowing, working with your trace nutrients, your calcium, your magnesium, your zinc, your boron. So understanding, looking and making sure that your organic matter is increasing over time, looking at the cation exchange capacity, all those things are important to an organic farmer. So just an NPK test is kind of like toilet paper to us. We need to know a lot more than that. So start thinking about that if you're in transition, is doing a full analysis. The other thing that's very attractive, most people get into organic because you get to experiment. You're going to be kind of learning on your own what crop rotations work, what don't, what doesn't work, and what your neighbor does may not be the same as what you need. If you have heavy clay and he has sand, it could be completely different. So you're just going to be so much more involved with the land that you're working with and really working in concert with the whole ecosystem that you have. There are a lot of really great organic seed varieties out there. The organic seed people are developing varieties that work best in an organic system. In an organic system, let's talk about corn. You're not going to plant late, super early, right? You're going to plant later because you're going to want to flush a few weeds. Your seed doesn't have fungicide on them, so you can't plant it in cold soil. So when you plant your corn, you want it to come up fast. You want it to canopy quickly. The conventional seeds don't necessarily have those traits because they don't care about that. So the organic seed breeders, that's what they're breeding in to their seeds. So again, using organic seed varieties, there'll be totally new seed varieties that you're learning about, and of course, dealing with weeds and pests. But another thing that's really important is to know what your buyers need, and this is both in the transition years and after you're certified. Because if you're working with a certain buyer, they may want a certain variety of seed. They may want you to hold it in a bin for a certain amount of months, or they might want to buy it out of the field. And knowing all those things will help you be more economically viable because you're giving the buyers what they need. But that's just common sense. But if you're used to a conventional system where you just haul everything down to the elevator, this is a little bit different. And of course, I love this part, build relationships with other organic farmers. If you're just growing grain, you should probably be looking for dairy farmers in your area and see if you can work with them directly, because they may not have enough land for what they need. And then your rotation can be part of what they need. And some years you may be selling them hay, some years you may be selling them corn silage, other years you'll be selling them grain, and then that way you have a market for your full rotation. So, organic farms and farmers substitute inputs with knowledge and management. And so over time, when you're looking at the economic viability of organic, it's not about yield in bushels. It's about dollars per acre. And part of that is going to be that your input costs are going to be less. Now, if you want to have a lot of input costs, you could probably get those higher yields. But if you look at the conventional side, they're also having a lot of high input costs, and that partially is related to the high yields that they get. So it's up to you, and putting pencil to paper, if you, let's say, your yield, you typically get 120 bushel per acre corn on your land, maybe in organic you're only going to get 100 or 90. But if your costs are much less, and the organic price is double, you're probably making a lot more dollars per acre, even though your yield is less. So pay attention to that. It's not only, and if you're a dairy farmer, it's the same thing. It's not about the pounds of milk in the bulk tank, it's about the dollars per cow. Okay, so in the regulation, anyone who sells more than $5,000 annually in organically labeled crops must be certified. So this is the certification process. It's not very much. And they have to have a yearly inspection. So every year during the crop season, someone will come out and look at your farm. If you are selling less than $5,000 a year, those crops must be sold direct to consumer. It can't be further processed. So even if you have hay, let's say you're in transition and you have about $4,000 worth of hay, you can't sell that as organic because you're under $5,000, because it's going to be further processed in an animal. And then the organic product is actually the milk or meat that's being sold. So basically, if you're growing grain, you have to be certified. So the process is, you choose an agency. On our website, we have a fact sheet called How to Choose a Certification Agency. We give you some questions to consider and then call a few different agencies. All the agencies are also up on our website. We don't prefer one over another. They have all the same exact standards. They compete on service and fees and cost. So just see who do you like. I mean, if you want to pay a little less, you may not be able to just call them up every day. They may only be open only on Mondays. If that makes a difference to you, if you want to call somebody because you want to use a new product or whatever, you don't want to wait for just once a week, then you might want to pay a little more. It's all up to you. So you choose an agency and you get an application. Don't freak out. It's going to be like 18 pages long. But most of it is multiple choice questions. What do I do for crop fertility? Cover crops, check. Animal manures, check. I don't know, fish emulsion, check. Crop rotation, check. So it doesn't take that long. Most of it will be just you pulling together information on your previous land use and the inputs that you've had on that land. And then you send it off to the agency. They make sure that everything is complete. So if you say you have 5 fields and you only have maps attached for 3, they will say, we can't move this forward until we get the other 2 maps. Then they assign an inspector. If you know of an organic inspector, you cannot hire them directly. It goes through the agency, and they must see the crops during the growing season. They then come out, they make an appointment. It's not a surprise, although there are surprise inspections out there. The National Organic Program mandates 5% of all the organic operations have an unannounced inspection in the year. And as a matter of fact, my husband's an organic inspector, and that's what he's doing today. He's out on an unannounced inspection. Which is kind of a new, but it's a dairy farmer, so he's looking at the dairy cows because it's kind of hard to see crops right now. Then the inspector writes a report, which you will see, and they send it to the agency with just basically they're verifying that everything that you wrote in the application was true. If you say you're using manure and you haven't used manure for 10 years, then we have to modify that organic system plan because it's not really true. They'll look at all the documentation and they'll either approve or deny your certification. Usually denial of certification at the first year is because you don't quite have enough time between the last use of a prohibited substance. Or they might make comments like a certain area had erosion and it needs to be seeded down or that sort of thing. It'll take 3 to 5 hours for the inspection and they'll look at everything. Yes, I know, it seems like a long time. Well, it could be 2 hours. It depends how big your farm is and how complicated. But they have to see every field. They have to see every border of every field. They have to see all documentation on your inputs, what seeds you used, that sort of thing. And there'll be discussion. I mean, even things like, do they spray the roadsides in your area? Do you have signs up to prevent them from spraying next to your organic field, that sort of thing. And also, it's actually kind of nice, the organic inspector, while they can't be a consultant to you, they can be really useful in helping you see areas in your organic system that could be lacking. And they can be a resource of resources. So this person has been on probably hundreds, if not thousands, of organic farms. So here you've got someone there that you can use to ask questions of, especially relating to the regulation. There's also organic certification cost share. So once you become certified and pay the money, you can get the money, you can get 3/4 of the money back, up to $750. So that is part of the Farm Bill, and we've had it now for quite a few years. So if you pay $1,000 for certification, you can get $750 rebate back, and your certification only costs you $250. And that's on an annual basis. So on an organic farm, there's quite a few conservation benefits, and the regulation actually mandates that you maintain or improve the natural resources of your farm. So that's when I talked about erosion. That is really, it's not just frowned upon. You could lose certification if you refuse to deal with erosion problems on your farm. So this is an organic system plan, which happens to also be the application that you're completing. So the law says you have to have a plan, and so the certifiers put that plan together for you as to apply for organic certification. But you also have to keep some of your own records, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. You can keep a field activity book, like a little spiral notebook that you keep in your truck or your tractor, and this is basically what it should have. What you're doing, what you used, where you used it, how are you keeping track of the effectiveness of what you're doing? Are you keeping track of like any drift activities that might happen from the neighbor coming onto your land, or wildlife eating your human-consumed crop, or whatever it might be? What kind of seed you used where, and the buffer zones, which I will get to very soon. You can do something like this, draw a map and keep track on that, and then you just photocopy that, and then every year you just write down, here's your activities, here's your inputs.
Oh,
Yeah, no.
it drifted, so the arrow, you have to go back down to that.
Okay.
You got it.
Or you can use your Farm Service Agency map. Anybody can get these. And these are actually real nice because they can show the organic inspector, is there a waterway coming from the neighbor? Is there woods around your fields? You have power lines going through your fields? All that will be easily seen on an aerial photo. So record keeping is an important aspect of organic production, and part of that is you're going to be making a lot of management decisions, and it's based on your own historical knowledge. And there's nothing more valuable than knowing what works on your farm, in your ecosystem. Nobody else is going to have that, just you. And how many of you, even though many of you are young, how many of you can remember what you did last year on July, 5 years ago on July 4th or whatever? Try to remember all the different things that go on a farm. You really need to write it down. And they can be very, very, very useful. Did I drift again? I'm a drifter. Okay, so record keeping doesn't have to be burdensome, just complete. So if you've got receipts for your seed invoices or inputs, just make a place and put them there. A file cabinet, a 3-ring binder, an envelope with the year on it. That's all. And the thing is, you'll be very happy during tax time too, because almost all the records that you have to keep for organic are the same things that you're going to be referring to when you're filling out your Schedule F on your tax form in April. And of course, keeping track of your harvests and where things are used or sold is very important. So you're going to need receipts or labels for your seeds, activity logs that show when and where you put on manure or any other soil amendments, tillage, planting, cultivation, harvest, long-term field histories so you can track your crop rotation, storage records showing which fields went into which bin, because if there was a problem, maybe with GMO drift or something like that, you would know which bin had that field in it. And sales records. So this is the definition of organic. It's a really good definition. I may not agree with everything that's in our regulation, but most of it I think is excellent. And if you notice, it doesn't say what we don't do, it says what we do, right? We, as organic farmers, integrate cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that foster the cycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. That's the definition. It doesn't say we don't like chemicals. It's very proactive, positive, and this is really what you're striving for as an organic farmer. And this is really what the organic consumer wants to see in the food production system that they're purchasing as organic. So when you're transitioning, you cannot use any prohibited materials, and that includes seed treatments. This is something where people do get tripped up a little bit. You're not mandated to use organic seed during your transition years, but you cannot use GMO seeds, you cannot use anything treated with a synthetic that is not approved. All your fields must have distinct boundaries and then buffer zones if they adjoin conventional production. So more and more people are ripping out the fence row, and then somebody just sticks a T-post in and puts a bucket on it and says that's the edge. You're gonna need to have a little bit more than that, because we have to know where the organic field starts. Can't be some kind of nebulous thing. And of course, the transition period is not just 3 years, it's 36 months from the last application of a prohibited substance to the harvest of the organic crop. So if let's say Roundup was put on your land in August, 3 years later, you would not be able to sell probably your first or second crop hay as organic, but maybe your third crop hay could be. You're gonna count back 36 months. Previously fallow land can grow an organic crop immediately. It's not like one day you just wake up and say, I'm starting my organic transition. It just goes by how many months since the last prohibited substance. So CRP land, pasture land that had not had any spot spraying on it can be certified organic immediately. And you don't have to have every field or all your livestock certified. So there are people who have organic dairies and then they raise up beef cattle, and the beef cattle are not organic, but the dairy animals are. Same with fields. You can have 100 acres of certified organic and 3,000 acres of conventional fields. That's all okay. So, again, there is more management and less inputs in organic. You rely on crop rotations and cover cropping to provide a multitude of benefits. So the cover crops provide soil erosion, protection from wind or rain. They increase the organic matter in your soil. They make your weed management more effective, because when you have more organic matter in your soil, when you're cultivating, it's going to flow in the row and cover the little weeds in the row instead of throwing clods, right? So the better your soil is in, the more effective your weed control will be. So this is a mandate. This is part of the regulation. You must have a soil building rotation, which means you cannot have continuous row crops in organic. It says that you cannot have crops of the same species or family in the same field grown year after year without an interruption. That's the actual wording. So here I see certifiers allowing, if you're a dairy farmer specifically, you can grow 2 years of corn, but you need to have a cover crop after the first year, because you have to have that interruption. And then typically, many of the dairy farmers seed it down, they grow oats or barley, and then they have alfalfa. So when you look at it, they might have a 7-year rotation, but in that 7 years, it's only 2 years of row crop. So it's 5 years that land is not being cultivated. That's a soil building rotation. If you don't want to grow any hay in rotation, you can do that too. You can do a very short rotation, like do corn, beans, and then have oats with maybe a red clover underseeding, and then till in that red clover, and then go back to oats and corn. So you'll have 3 crops: corn, beans, and oats. And in a 3-year rotation, you'll have that beautiful red clover to till in. And you had a question.
Yeah, do a lot of organic farmers just use no-till so they don't disturb the soil as much?
There is a
Can you
no-till.
repeat the question?
Okay, so the question is, do organic farmers do no-till farming? And there's only one method, and that's when you can grow a rye crop that's overwintered, and then you roll it down. And I think I can go backwards. Oops, I'm not going backwards, I'm going forwards. There. That's called a roller crimper. So after someone has done that, they're going to come in with a drill or a row crop planter and plant typically soybeans. and then they have a mulch and they don't do any cultivating. But that won't be continuous no-till. Then they will till in that mulch the next year and plant probably another row crop. So they can maybe do this type of no-till farming every other year or something like that.
I can also share that both Mark Dudla, sitting right here, has a lot of fields under no-till, that same process that Harriet just mentioned, and Aaron Silva, also right over here, is going to be presenting on that in about 2 weeks. So we're definitely going to cover that. That's a great question.
Yeah. So when you're selling your crops as organic, you must implement tillage and cultivation practices that maintain or improve the physical, chemical, and biological condition of the soil and minimize soil erosion. So that's why we don't do organic by neglect. It's a proactive, positive method of production that's really looking to continually improve the resources that you have on your farm. So just, you know, where I live in the western part of the state where we have a lot of very hilly, steep fields. Pretty much strip cropping is mandated if you're going to grow row crops on a side hill. You can't, and you definitely can't plant up and down the hill. You need to be managing your land. And if you're really involved in the organic method, you're working to build soil. Why would you want to lose it and have it run downhill? You want to keep it where it is. So this is just part of the whole organic system. This is a slide from the Rodale Institute showing 20 years of the similar tillage intensity and just the difference that you can see between organically managed land and non-organically managed land. Adding those crop residues, cover crops, and animal manures, and some people refer to it, you know, the kind of soil you're trying to achieve looks like chocolate cake. It's dark, it smells good, it's crumbly, it's got great aggregate, and just if I was a plant, that's where I want to be growing, in that dark soil. So this is very different than non-organic. So I've been to the farm technology days and seen the big sign, feed the plant, not the soil. This is exactly the opposite of what we want to do in organic. We want to feed the soil and not the plant. We're not looking, the soil is so much more than just keeping the plant upright, okay? It is feeding the plant, it's improving while you're growing your crops, hopefully you're even improving your soil. This is someone who grows sweet corn in a large way, and they don't use any input besides tilling in hairy vetch in the early spring that they grew over winter. So they had a winter cover crop that protected against erosion, they till it in, and they grow like the best sweet corn you'd ever want to know. So cover crops too have a lot of different benefits. They are catch crops. So if you, in the fall, if you put in an overwintering cover crop, you can put manure on there. It will prevent the nitrogen from leaching. It'll hold that nitrogen for you till the next spring when you till it in, then it releases it. Obviously, the cover crops protect from wind and rain erosion. They can be fertility inputs, like growing anything that's a legume. You can interseed cover crops. Right where I am in Crawford County, we're aerially seeding in cover crops into standing crops in August, so we can get them established before the harvest, and then you get beautiful overwintering cover crops. When the combine's out there, if it happens to be a wet fall, you're not compacting the soil, right, because you're actually combining on a lawn. This is very nice. And you can even put cattle out there in the fall when they're foraging on the corn stalks. They could also have something green and growing. So here's about the buffer zones. Every field, if it adjoins a field that's being conventionally managed where prohibited materials are being sprayed, has to have a buffer zone of sufficient size. That's what the regulation says. What does that mean? Well, typically, here in the upper Midwest, we allow 25 to 30 feet if it's just being applied with a ground boom. If there's aerial application next door, you might have to have 60 or 100 feet because it's going to be more of a chance of drift if an airplane or crop duster is going overhead. It's kind of just the bad luck of the organic farmer if you've got somebody aerially spraying. They're not supposed to drift even with crop dusters, but the chance of it, and we're looking at risk management here, that the size is based on the risk. Putting up signs, getting listed with driftwatch.org, driftwatch.org is a place where then the applicators go to look and see where the organic farmers are. Hopefully they won't spray when it's the winds are too strong. The other thing too, since we're using manure, that doesn't mean that we are immune from using it well. So if you're going to be spreading manure on frozen grounds, you may need to have a nutrient management plan, because again, we're protecting the natural resources of the operation, and we don't want at a snow melt that all your manure ends up in the trout stream. So we'll work with the NRCS and they'll help us put good nutrient management plans in place. If you are using manure also, it must be composted if it's for human the crop is for human consumption. If you're only growing livestock feed, it doesn't matter. You can put manure out there the day before you harvest if you want, but I don't know who would do that. but human consumed food. So that includes those clear Highland tofu beans. That includes, if you're growing wheat for somebody, using bread, or barley to be malted for beer. Those would have to follow these rules, which is if the crop itself that's going to be humanly consumed is in contact with soil particles, it has to be 120 days from the manure application to the harvest. If it's not in contact with soil particles, it can be 90 days. So that would be like sweet corn, so like soybeans, the tofu beans would be 90 days. But if they're edamame, where people do eat the pod, then it would be 120 days. Yeah.
Is pelleted similar to composting?
So actually, excellent question, because that's right here. So the difference is that there's a very strict definition for compost, right up there. The amount of temperature and how many times it has to be turned, but there's also an allowance for processed manures, which is a lot of those pelletized chicken manures specifically, and they have a requirement there in that little green box in the bottom of the temperature they had to have reached, and there has to be a pathogen test on it if you want to use it less than the withdrawal time of 120 or 90 days. Other things to track with manure, they don't do this much anymore, but you can't feed arsenic to poultry, but they stopped doing that about 1.5 years ago. Hopefully they won't pick it up again. But a lot of times too, people might be putting something on the manure after it comes out of the animal. They could be putting some synthetics in a manure lagoon. They could be spraying their piles with solid manure with either an herbicide or a fly spray. If that has happened, then it can't be used on organic land. Other than that, anything. Those animals could have been given antibiotics, they could have been fed GMO feeds, they could have had hormones. It doesn't matter what went into the animal, other than arsenic. That manure is okay when it comes out, as long as it hasn't been treated with anything synthetic. And if the bedding can be from any source that's natural. The USDA considers GMO corn natural, but they couldn't be like treated wood shavings. There was some kind of an issue with somebody was getting wood shavings from a window manufacturing plant where there was paint and glue and all this stuff on there, so that was not allowed. These are all the different fertility inputs you can use. So there's fish emulsion, soybean meals, soil bacterias, the dehydrated pelletized manures, which are very nice because you can run them through the fertilizer box, get that right in the row. But things like gypsum.
We got a question, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's fish emulsion?
You could repeat that.
What is fish emulsion? It is ground up fermented fish.
Real taste.
And there's quite a large company that pulls kind of waste fish out of Lake Michigan and makes fish emulsion. And it's very high in nitrogen, phosphorus. So if you want to, let's say, have calcium sulfate, You can use gypsum, but you can't use recycled wallboard. And there are people who are looking to get rid of that. It seems to be like agriculture is the place to put all the toxic waste, but we can't use that because it has mold inhibitors and paints and glues and who knows what else. So anything that's been mined and not been chemically altered is okay to be used on the soil. So quarry lime that's just been mechanically crushed, fine. Hydrated lime that's been cooked and changed from calcium carbonate to calcium oxide, not okay, because it's been chemically altered. So there could be issues with pellets. They'd want to know what is the pellet, are there some, what is the agent used to kind of bind them together, if there is one, dust suppressants, chelators, heavy metals, all these things are things that your certifier will want to look at. And so you just run the ingredients by the certifier of what you want to use, and they'll let you know if it's okay. So these are some things that are okay. These are some things that are not okay. And so no genetic engineering, no sewage sludge. That includes lime used in the sewage treatment plant. These are the big 3 no-nos, and no irradiation. We have a national list, and our list is actually a list of negatives. So everything that's natural is allowed, and everything that is synthetic is not. And so our national list has a list of approved synthetics, right, because I said synthetics are not allowed. So some are allowed, and we put them on the list. And then there's some naturals that are prohibited, like arsenic, or tobacco dust to be used as an insecticide. That's natural, but we don't allow it. So our list is the non-approved naturals and the approved synthetics, and it's broken up into crops, livestock, and processed foods. So again, this is not the easiest thing to get through, and that's why you have a certifier, or you have me, to call, and I'll let you know what's allowed and what's not. We also have a hierarchy for pest, weed, and disease management. And so first, you have to use cultural, biological, mechanical, physical controls, right? We're a systems-based approach. It's a method of production. Second, you can use those natural things like mineral inputs or botanicals. And then lastly, you can use those approved synthetics, but only if you document that the first 2 were ineffective. So again, it's not input substitution. It's not, oh, I used to use this to kill my pests and now I'll use this. That's not what we do. We first approach it, how do we manage it first through cultural or botanical methods, and then we can use those synthetics. This is another kind of cultural activity. So you have big monoculture fields versus smaller fields with lots of field edges. And Iowa State has done some experiments and shown that the higher the diversity around the field is directly correlated to the lowering of soybean aphids within that field, because you're giving the beneficial insects a place to live. You're also growing lots of different crops, right? So a soybean aphid isn't going to eat corn. So you've got a smaller field. I'm not saying tiny fields. You don't have to be half-acre fields, although there's some farmers that do strip cropping like that, just to kind of break those pest cycles. But if you can allow some of the natural ecosystem to be around your fields, you'll get services that help you, and then you don't have to use anything as an input. You've used the ecosystem to help you control your pests. So this is the roller crimper, but I'm going to let Erin talk about that because she's going to give all kinds of great information. But it can be done, and that right there in the middle, that's a field, an organic soybean field. In late August, there's no weeds, and they beat the county average. That was Tom Miller's farm. So again, is understanding the ecology of weed management. If you can kind of take care of the small weeds, and then you don't disturb too deeply, you won't get new weed seeds coming up from down below. So if you can do as much shallow tillage as possible, like a rotary hoe or tine weeder, this is not necessarily, well, you can do some kind of shallow with a Williston cultivator or flame weeder, which doesn't actually till at all. If you can take care of those small weeds, timing is everything, you're gonna have a clean field. And usually organic farmers have many tools in their toolbox for weed management. That's dramatic.
Right there.
Although flame weeding can be a little tricky, so I wouldn't say it's the first thing we should do. You have to use organic seeds unless you can show that there's no commercially available seed in the type that you want. But you can never use treated seed that's been treated with a synthetic. That's not allowed. Natural treatments are allowed. But you need to, but as far as if you're looking at vegetables, planting stock, you can use non-organic, but you have to have it under organic system for a year. And although annual seedlings, you don't have a choice. If you want to grow organic tomatoes, they have to be certified organic tomato plants. This includes your cover crop seeds. So if you're going to grow rye, clover, and you're certified organic, you have to use organic seeds. Unless you can prove you can't find them. And I'll tell you, it's pretty hard to not find organic seeds these days. They're everywhere. And they're and lots of different varieties and all those things. So I know that your cousin might be selling you, the same corn, you got your neighbor that you've been buying seed from for years and years and years. You don't want to ruin that relationship. If he doesn't sell organic seed, you can't buy from him anymore. Just tell him to carry organic seed, yeah.
What if I have seed from my neighbors planted now? Can I save seed from that and save my own seed and be okay?
Yes, so if you're saving your own seed and it's not in the buffer zone, that's certified organic seed.
Okay.
Yeah.
In transitional acres.
Transition does not have to be certified organic seed for cover crops or anything.
Can I harvest my transitional acres
Yeah.
and plant them as organic seed?
You
If
can
it's
do that,
internal.
but over time, the certifier will tell you that you should be always planting organic seed, but they accept it. I haven't seen anyone not get certified for using non-organic seed, but they do have to push you to do that because that's part of our rule.
And do short course students have any questions before you guys have to take off? Yeah, I got a couple.
With pasture that hasn't been sprayed, you said can be certified immediately.
Yes,
Okay, what if you use synthetic commercial fertilizer?
no, anything that's been
So-
synthetic, that's not approved, it has to
That's
be
still
3
good.
years
Okay.
with no prohibited substances. So the question was, can it have commercial fertilizer but no herbicide? And the answer is no. It has to be everything, no fungicides, no insecticides that are not specifically approved in organic for 36 months before your harvest of organic crops. Yeah.
Okay, also talk about spraying and the spray damage. Is there now if your neighbor, if your crops get damaged because it's neighboring a conventional field, does insurance cover that? Or is that, how does that work, I guess?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
So this is a very tricky subject, and the National Organic Program is starting to look at this more.
Whose fault is it?
But here in the state of Wisconsin, it is illegal, doesn't matter what it drips upon. It's illegal for your conventional spray to go over the fence line.
Sure.
So the main issue, and you're supposed to have a buffer zone, but if it goes further and you lose your organic crop, you can't sell it at an organic price anymore. Typically, either the farmer's insurance or the sprayer's insurance will cover you for that extra, the organic price. But sometimes they fall off their chairs when you tell them that even though conventional corn is $3.50 and you're selling your organic corn for $12, they're like, you want us to cover what? So you might have a little bit of an issue there that they might not want to cover the full organic price.
Gotcha.
But legally, and here in Wisconsin, we're pretty good. If there's ever a drift incident, you must call the state immediately and have them come out and document it. It's so much easier for you to get that payment if you had that independent third party verify that it occurred.
Thank you.
All right. For genetic drift from GMO, you don't lose your organic certification, but you can lose your market. And there's no insurance on that. So there's also GMO bacteria that can be put on nitrogen-fixing crops. You know, the rhizobial bacteria, so you've got to be careful of that, because you put that on, it'll be 3 years till you can then sell an organic crop from that field. And high price is not an acceptable reason to not buy organic seed. It's the quantity, quality, and variety, if you can't find those. So I'm a vegetable grower and I want to grow purple celery and I can't find it in an organic seed. I still can't use something treated with a synthetic, but I can use that seed then, because I don't know any purple celery. Do you? I did find purple celery, but it was nothing. Okay, I just talked about the drift. You can still sell it as organic, even it's been shown to have unwanted GMO traits in it. You do not lose your certification from GMO drift. And I don't know where this is going to go, but there's a lot of discussion now how to deal with this. In handling, you can't commingle or contaminate your organic crop. So you can't say, I'm going to put conventional corn in the bottom of my bin and then throw the organic on top. Okay, that's kind of commingling. So you need to clean everything. The combine, the auger, the bin, the gravity wagon, and even the truck that comes to get the grain has to be verified clean. And you document it either in your little book or in a calendar, or you have a form. A lot of the certifiers have forms. And don't ever believe somebody else that it's clean. You're the organic farmer, because the GMO traits are in the dust. And so if it's just a dusty truck, and you got to watch too for the tarps, right? That they may have gone to the car wash or the truck wash and washed the truck, but if they didn't open up the tarp, there's all this dust on the inside of the tarp. And what's going to happen, right? They're going to put that over your crop. They're going to go to the buyer, and they're going to stick a probe in it. And they're going to pull out, right? It's going to be right through the top, and it's going to come back as a load that has GMO contamination. And you, the farmer, the truck driver is still going to get his money for hauling your stuff, but you're going to lose your organic price. Even in bins, especially if it's like an air bin, a bin that has a floor with air, you're going to pull that false floor out, come in and clean that entirely, because if there's any GMO dust on the floor, as soon as you turn on the fan, you're just driving it right through the corn. So if you're working with a custom combiner who has done a conventional farmer before you, you're going to have to open all the doors. You're going to run it empty. You're going to get out the shop vac. You're going to get out the compressed air, and you're going to purge it. So it really depends on the size and type of combine, how much it is. But typically, you kind of run in the field about 20, 25 feet, and then you separate that purge, and you sell that off to the co-op, or you give it to your neighbor, and you keep track of what you did, write it down, that you purge, and that's the only way to clean a combine, is with a purge. John Deere did a test on this because they were trying to figure out for people who grew seed, and they're trying to retain, right, that variety of seed. They they did it like 3 different ways, with, just opening the doors, blowing it out, and then also the purge. And then they rented an airplane hangar, and they tore those combines down to the bolts. And the only way to clean it was with a purge, the final. They found stuff hung up all over, but any of you who've ever cleaned a combine know that it's easy to hang things up there. You can use silage inoculants. They are approved, as long as they are not synthetic. That also goes for large-scale balers. A lot of times there's some kind of like calcium propionate is used a lot as a preservative, but you can also use lactobacillus. So basically you're just inoculating those bales with a beneficial bacteria that prevents the mold. So again, always run everything by the certifier to make sure that it's okay. So again, this is just, this is the kind of thing that you have to, that's the documentation. what you did, when you did it. And if there was anything that you either sold or used or dumped, you're good. If it's a large square or small square baler, you might have to take 2-3 bales out and say these are non-organic, right? Because that's the way to kind of purge that. Because there's always some hay. A large round baler, pretty much self-cleaning. But again, if it's a custom guy, you're gonna look at it and make sure it's clean. Don't just trust somebody else to tell you. A lot of times the bins are numbered. They might say organic on them, especially if you're doing organic and non-organic. You don't want somebody accidentally driving up to the wrong bin and loading out the wrong stuff. So, and remember too, the buffer zones are all non-organic. So if you are harvesting, but you can grow corn in your buffer zone, but you have to separate it. You have to purge after you've harvested it with organic crop. And then you can, and keep track of how it was used for non-organic production or sold or whatever. What I do see people doing is mostly they seed it down to hay and have the neighbor make it and then sell it off to somebody who's got non-organic beef or something. But if you wanted to grow a row crop in that area, you could. What would be better would be is if you had organic corn and then in that field you had organic soybean, non-organic soybeans in the buffer. So it's like so obvious that it's totally different crop. That'll make the certifier a lot happier and you'll have a lot less documentation to maintain. Anytime that you're doing organic and non-organic on the same farm, there's a lot more documentation. Because we want to make sure that the non-organic stuff is not accidentally or intentionally entering the non-organic stream. Okay.
So that is the last slide.
That's the last slide, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do too bad. So, other questions?
There are a lot of questions online.
Oh.
So actually, I can just scroll through here and maybe read them out loud. Or
Okay.
you could also do that yourself. There's a lot to sort through here. So I'll just read the first one, which is, what if you did a diverse a cover crop mix after wheat, a grass, and then planted corn, a grass, but the diverse cover crop mix had a grass in it, along with legumes and non-legume broadleafs?
Cover crops are considered a different crop from corn. So corn, even though yes, technically it is in the grass family, you can grow rye as an interruption between 2 corn crops.
So grass on grass, as long as it's different species.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Next question is, regarding the USDA, what kind of record keeping and or practices do I need to follow to keep my conventional and organic grains separate? I'm going to be using the same combine grain truck and so on both for harvest. So you covered that, some of the actual
Yeah,
cleaning,
so
but
just
in terms
clean-
of record keeping.
Well, you've got to document, and it should say how many hours. It took me 4 hours to blow it out. And that's, if it took you 20 minutes, nobody's going to believe that's a clean combine. So how long did you take? What did you do? I ran it empty for 20 minutes. I used my compressed air, then I went in with the shop vac. If you have cylinders, you maybe remove the cylinder bars, whatever it might be. Whatever you did, you write it down.
Mm-hmm. And that's the majority of the record.
And that's the record. And it can go, I like a calendar a lot. You just have get a calendar with big boxes and you just write things down there. You've got the date already.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's also kind of nice to use as your historical record, right? You can see I planted corn on these dates last year, I can wait a little bit, that was a little early or late or whatever, but you can use spiral notebook. You can use even a smartphone or a computer, but it has to be easily auditable of the certifying agent and the inspector. So we have not learned the Vulcan mind meld, if you remember Mr. Spock from Star Trek. So if you say that your records are in your head, that is unacceptable because an inspector cannot find them there.
Truth. What I'll also say in response to that question about record keeping for split operations is that we have Randy Hughes, who is a farmer in the area who also has a quite large split operation. He's coming in on Tuesday. So we'll be able to talk a lot more about split operations and can ask him very specific questions about how he manages
I bet
that.
he'll bring you some blue corn chips too.
Oh yeah. Snacks for the class. Sorry, people online. All right, next question is, this is more of a statement, a comment. I have experienced drift from a high boy that moved 700 plus feet and resulted in specialty crop damage. 25 to 30 feet seems a pretty minuscule for a buffer. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, this was trying to be farmer friendly, that if the person who's applying the prohibited substances over the fence is doing it according to the regulations, which, right, there's not supposed to go over a certain, if the wind speed is higher than a certain amount, and of course it ties also to the actual product that they're using. Some products have, make the droplets heavier to prevent drift and all those things. If you still have drift, you first must always get the state out there to verify that happened. It'll be much easier to deal with the insurance companies to get your money. And 25 to 30 feet, at times it can be not quite enough. But like I said, it is a law that it can't go on across the fence line even. I mean, it is the legal definition of drift is that it stays on your side of the fence. If it comes over, any damage you owe people, and especially if when the state comes out they determine that you were spraying when the wind speed was too high, then they get a fine in addition to having to pay your damages. So I know that more and more drift is occurring in the state, and that's another important reason why you should contact the state, because they're keeping statistics, and if people don't report it, then they say it's not happening. So I know that's happening because people call me. Not like I can really do anything, but I can make recommendations. And there are some lawyers that are starting to specialize in that, but I mean, you don't really want to get the lawyers involved because then you get less money, and then you have this confrontational relationship with your neighbor. But it's always a good idea to just tell your neighbor, I'm farming organically, this is my organic field, can you please be careful, or tell your custom operator, anything that you have done. And I mean, you can write scary letters too if you want. I mean, you can write, I'm growing organically over the fence, and if 1 inch of your stuff comes over the fence, I'm going to sue you, But that's not going to really get what you want. You would much rather have them be feeling like, oh, this guy's going into a niche marketplace, he's my neighbor, I want to have good relationships with him, I will be careful, rather than, well, this guy's threatening me, and I'll show him. So the best relationships you can have, the better. But that said, a lot of times, absentee landowner, you don't even know who the landowner is, the co-op is, spraying, 2,000 acres in a day, and they're just in a big hurry, and things happen.
Okay, so good communication, good fences, and low wind spray days. Make good neighbors.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Next is, can your buffer zone be a beneficial insect strip?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, the Natural Resources Conservation Service has a whole variety of cost share or incentive payments to help people. There's one called Field Border that specifically can be used for planting native prairie. They'll give you quite a bit of money to help you with that expensive seed. They'll also help if you want to put in a hedgerow or a windbreak. They'll pay for that too. Not entirely. They pay, approximately 75%. It just depends how much labor you put in or whatever. I mean, if you do a lot of the work, you can almost get 100% of what you spend from them. They have a kind of depends on the practice, how much they pay, sometimes per row feet or whatever. But yeah, that's an excellent idea. I've done it on my own farm, and it's wonderful.
You can go to the NRCS website to get more information.
Yeah, or every county has an NRCS office. So you go to your district conservationist. Typically, they share an office with the Farm Service Agency.
Yeah. Okay, good. And a follow-up from the same questioner. Do you have any experience using a rotavator, something advocated by Gary Zimmer of MBA, Midwest BioWig?
I personally do not have experience, but I've seen it used. I know people that really, really like it because it's a one-pass. You can have a stand of clover or alfalfa and basically kind of incorporate it, not too, you can also control how shallow, and it's a one pass. sometimes, with
It's not
alfalfa,
always one pass.
well,
I've used it on pastures before, and the groundwork's up so hard, you
yeah,
have to-
pasture would maybe, but something like a clover that you planted for cover crop,
Mhm.
you might be able to get through, through
Sure,
that
sure.
in one pass. But something that's a little more compacted like pasture, yeah, that would be a
Comment
little
from
harder.
the, comment from the class was pasture might be not one pass for the rotavator,
Yeah.
a little bit harder soils, they're not tilled up more
Right, and
regularly.
it just does a great job incorporating, because if you were trying to get rid of, you might have to either use a plow, or chisel plow, or disc, and then you'll have to come in and drag it, there's so many more passes with something that's not as, you need a good horsepower tractor to pull a rotavator. But it could be a really good tool.
Have you used that, Mark?
Mine's for sale. I have a 14-footer and I'm done.
All right.
I'm gonna go to a high-speed disc or something else. I'm in Rock County. I can't keep up with the maintenance. It's a nice concept, but going a mile an hour in spring just doesn't do it for me.
Yep, okay, so we have a farmer in class who's willing to sell his rotavator to anyone online.
Yeah, so, and then, like I said, there's lots of different tools in the toolbox, it just depends what you need or don't need.
For small acreage, it could be perfect.
Smaller acreage, he says it would be better.
Yep, great, thank you for that, Mark. Do different certifying agencies have different requirements on manure usage?
No, there's absolutely one requirement, and that's the regulation, which is if it's a crop for human consumption, you need to have that withdrawal period between the application of the manure and the harvest of the crop. So there's no wiggle room on that. And if they are not following the regulation, they will hear it from the National Organic Program.
Okay, this next question is a good one for you as a past certifier, but maybe now that you don't work as a certifier, you can answer more honestly, which is, how do they certify what product you use? For example, what if you put down lime, but put down the wrong type? How do certifiers know that?
Well, they're gonna wanna know exactly where you get it from.
Mhm.
Documentation, an invoice. You can't just say, oh, I bought it from the quarry down the road. No, we're gonna wanna see an invoice that shows that you bought 100 ton and you put it on 50 acres at 2 ton per acre.
Mhm.
All of that is gonna be there. And if it's a custom person applying it, that doesn't always do lime, we're gonna wanna know that that spreader was clean before.
Mhm.
Basically it's documentation, but, so for instance, I'll tell you something that happened with seed. So this was many years ago. A group of organic farmers, they thought it was a stupid rule that they had to use organic seed. So one person bought organic seed, and they were all using similar seed, and he passed around his seed tags to everybody else in the neighborhood, so that they could show that they were using organic seed. But it didn't work very well because the inspector, well, first of all, it's the same inspector. He's like, this looks like the same seed I saw yesterday. And he says, well, where's the invoice? I don't need to just see the tags that came off the bag. I need to see an invoice with your name on it. And if you're planting, 40 acres of corn, I'm going to want to see, 25 bags or, whatever rate you're planting it at. So there's many ways. Plus, as someone who's trained organic inspectors, we learn how to tell. It's pretty obvious, really, if somebody's lying.
Right.
And so you'll see that during organic inspection, that they'll ask the same question a few different ways. They'll look kind of stupid, but they don't care, because they're trying to figure out, do you answer this question with the same answer? But most of the time, most people, it's so hard, really, to lie, that you gotta work at it really hard. And if you can remember back in kindergarten, where you were like, you could lie, but you know what? You had to have 3, 4, 5, 6 different lies to keep covering your lie. And by the time you get out to the 6th lie, you don't remember what the first one was. So it's just not worth it.
Yeah. So the inspector's not out to get you, but to
No.
keep you honest and make sure that you are keeping
Yeah.
track. So worst case scenario, to follow up on this question, If you did use used wallboard and just weren't paying attention, then you just, when the inspector comes, you just have to fess up to it and say it is what it is, and what's going to
And
be the fallout.
hopefully, it's not in all your fields, you know, because the fields that didn't have it would still be certified, because it's not on a farm-by-farm basis, it's on a field-by-field basis. And you could even, if it was only half of a field, then you just say this is field 1A and 1B. And 1B is now out of certification for 36 months since that application. Typically, use of prohibited substances is really not on the land. If you have a dairy and you may be feeding salt that had a flowing agent that wasn't allowed, they might just say, stop that immediately and use that, because it's not as a big an issue as if you had just sprayed with Roundup. Oops, you know, no, sorry, that's 36 months.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That's a good answer. This next one is an answer to an earlier question. This is to Leonard. Best practices for it to be on the list of inputs with your OSP that is submitted to the certifier, or it wasn't on the list for that year of certification, run it by your certifier before applying.
Yeah, so it's just that's what you're paying them for. Is they're going to verify everything's okay before you use it, and they also verify if you're going to do any kind of retail product, they verify that those labels are legal to be in the marketplace. And there's nothing, I mean, if you've got an illegal label out there, I mean, it's so easy for the National Organic Program to give you a fine. You know, and they want to make money. So they did, I think, over $500,000 of fines last year.
All right.
So they, you know, they're doing that enforcement. So especially if it's like a label in the marketplace, just, you're paying the certifier, let them make sure it's legal.
Yep.
Because there's little details about where the certifier name has to be and what color the USDA seal has to be, and it's all there in the rule, but it's all in legalese. Just let the certifier help you.
Yeah. Okay, good advice. Next one is a scenario. A farmer plants Roundup-resistant alfalfa. After 36 months, can they sell the hay from the field as organic if they have treated it organically during those 36 months? If not, can the next crop be certified organic, or is it 36 months after the Roundup alfalfa has been destroyed?
It's an excellent question.
That's a good question.
And I just got appointed to the National Organic Standards Board, and that's going to be the very first question that I ask the NOP administrator. Because we have not had a perennial GMO crop until alfalfa was approved 2 years ago. And so we don't even have that scenario yet. But in 2017, we could. However, anyone who planted Roundup Ready alfalfa is probably spraying Roundup on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that wouldn't be an issue. But it could be somebody planted Roundup Ready alfalfa, then sold that land, and the new owner decided to go organic, right? Started the transition. You know, I mean, we also have in the pipeline genetically modified fruit trees coming down the pipe. What are you going to do about those?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a GMO apple. You know, what would the snake say about that in the Garden of Eden? I don't know. But we don't have those answers yet, and so it's going to be one of my very, very first questions. After I ask about pesticide drift, that'll be my next question.
All right, so stay tuned.
So I don't have the answer to that. And I know the certifiers are talking about it, but we haven't crossed that bridge yet. But we should be ready to have an answer by the time we do cross that bridge.
Okay, great. Next question about what is testable. This is a clarifying of an earlier question. So are certifiers ever testing for things, or is it the majority testing happening on the behalf of the purchaser?
So the testing, the National Organic Program has also mandated that 5% of all the operations have some residue testing. The USDA also does some surveillance, they call it, out in the marketplace. So they'll go to the organic produce aisle in Whole Foods in Kansas and go test it. The certifiers, however, are mostly testing where they feel there's risk. So their testing is not just choosing anybody. It's usually like if they feel that there's a high risk, you know, some farm is right next to an orchard, or their area is spraying, or there will be some surveillance testing done. And it's mandated to do at least 5% of all the operations by certifier that they so if they have 100 operations, they'll test the production from 5%.
Okay. Great.
But for GMO, you don't, there is some GMO testing, but you don't lose certification. It's still certified organic. Your buyer may not want to take it, but it's still certified organic.
Okay. A couple more questions online. This is a clarification of a point that you made earlier about manure. And it says, I've been told by other organic producers in my area that manure from conventional livestock operations can only be used if the bedding was organic, or in the case of sand, mined. I understand you to say that it isn't the case. Can you explain?
That is true. The bedding only has to be organic if it's on an organic farm. The organic dairy farmer or beef producer or poultry producer, anything that is used as bedding that the species could or would consume, if it's an organic livestock operation, that bedding must be organic. But if the manure is from a conventional operation to be used on organic land, it doesn't matter what the bedding was. It could have even been GMO corn stalks. It could have been GMO alfalfa. But it can't have had any sort of treatment. So if they were using wood chips, it couldn't have been treated wood chips, from treated wood, somebody, or sawdust from treated wood. But other than that, no. Yeah.
So to be clear, you could bring some manure that had been bedded with a GMO corn stalk, you could bring that onto the farm, but you couldn't use those corn stalks to bed with. Those
If
GMO
your
corn stalks.
livestock was organic, you can't use GMO corn stalks because that is not an organic bedding and your cattle could eat it. But you can take those GMO, people can even, a vegetable grower can even use GMO alfalfa hay or whatever as bedding. Not as bedding, as mulch. It can go on the soil. It can't go in an organic animal. That is probably going to be looked at as another one of the little things on my list to talk to. And also water. Right now, there's no, we're not really talking about, irrigation water. The certifiers look at it from a risk-based. If it's coming out of a surface water system, and there's a lot of conventional agriculture upstream where there could be a risk that there would be polluted, with atrazine or any other herbicide or conventional fertilizers, then there might be some testing and that might, but there's nothing in the rule that specifically says, other than you have to work to prevent prohibited substances from being on your land. But there's nothing that says irrigation water should be tested and have under a certain amount or whatever. So, and the same with livestock drinking water. There's nothing there. Now, that said, I was at a farm where it was an organic farm, one side of a pivot, and then the other side of the pivot was conventional. And they were injecting conventional fertilizers into the non-organic side, and then they were like, can we use that same irrigation system? It was like, whoa, we're gonna have to figure out, well, you're gonna have to kind of run water through it, clear water through it on the conventional side, and do testing, and then make sure, and then if they had a baseline, if they said if they ran it for 2 hours with clear water, and then it came and it was clear, then they would have to then document that every time they ran the pivot onto the organic land, that they had first run clear water through it on the conventional side before they moved the pivot over. So there are ways to kind of even share irrigation pivots, but you'd have to have some documentation that there wouldn't be any prohibited materials run through there.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. 2 more quick questions from online. A couple more. Do certifiers review all farm financial records during the inspection process?
It depends. If you have a split operation, they're going to want to see all your sales, not just your organic sales, but your conventional sales as well, because they're going to want to verify that you had 100 acres of conventional corn. And if you say you only get 60 bushel an acre on your conventional corn, you got 200 bushel an acre on your organic. Well, where did that extra come from? So that's where that comes from. That's kind of just checking that the organic is going through the organic stream, and the non-organic is going through the non-organic stream. So as far as, do they care what your inputs cost you? No. They just want to see, what did you buy, where did you put it? So as far as a financial analysis, they don't look at your Schedule F. They don't care if you're getting crop insurance payments or any of those other things that are part of revenue and cost. They just want to track that the production system can be verified, starting with the soil, from the seed, all the way through all the activities to sale.
Okay. And so they're not going to care as much where it was sold to, because that buyer will have their own certification process.
No, the inspector is keeping track of how many bushels got sold. And
So where that's going exactly.
Yeah, and then of course, how many are still in storage. I mean, a lot of people are, maybe carry over, right? They like to sell their corn for a little higher price. How are you gonna get the higher price? You sell it in June, right? Before there's any corn, right? That's where everybody's running out of corn, is in the spring and early summer. So it might be that the inspection, depending when it happens, some people even carry over more than 1 year, for whatever reason. So they want to know the inventory so they can track yields and sales.
Okay. We have a couple more online. Do we have any other questions in class you guys have? Go ahead.
One is about micronutrient application. So in addition, we need a soil test and a tissue test to apply any foliar nutrients.
So you just have to, and I did have a slide, I didn't go into it in depth, you do have to justify the use of your micronutrients. Basically, just to kind of verify that you are managing, right, to protect the resources. You're not kind of just over applying things willy-nilly, but most farmers are smart enough to not spend more than they need to. They are now looking at that it could be more than a soil test. It doesn't have to be a soil test, so if you're saying, my alfalfa's kind of yellow, I really think I need more potassium, and whatever it might be, they'll accept that, but you have to document it. So a soil test is not the only way to monitor the need for a micronutrient. You can, but you're not mandated to do 6 different things. One thing is enough, as long as it makes sense that what you're saying you're doing is a good way to monitor. You say, I went out there and I snapped a branch, and my corn stalks were a little weak, so I had to add more calcium. I mean, I don't know. You have to make a good case. Typically, soil tests are the best thing, but also, I mean, tissue testing is a very handy tool as far as knowing. The soil test tells you what's in the ground. The tissue test tells you what actually got taken up by the plant.
Okay, great. Next question is, can you have contact information for Harriet? I'm now working on a document that will have contact information for all presenters who have presented, as well as those in the future. She's holding up a card right now that people in class can have access to, but everyone online, you will definitely be getting your contact information.
You can go to Moses Organic, M-O-S-E-S Organic, all one word, .org. And if you go to the staff, my email is there, the toll-free number is there. And I want to invite everyone to go to our conference. We're going to probably have over 3,500 people. We're having 2 all-day courses at the Organic University specifically on organic grain production. One is with Jeff Moyer for beginning organic grain. He's going to talk a lot about the organic no-till. And the other one is with Joel Gruber from Western Illinois University, Jonathan Olson from up in northwestern Minnesota, and Jack Erisman from central Illinois. Very experimentative, long-time organic farmers. And this is meant for advanced row crop. So, and they're gonna expand your brain. They're gonna make you think way outside the box. So I would not recommend that for a beginning person, because we're not gonna be talking about foundational activities in an organic system. They're gonna be talking about, and they do all kinds of wild stuff, and they've got all kinds of, kind of homemade equipment and modified equipment and what they have done And Jack and Jonathan both manage over 1,200 acres of organic traits.
Nice.
So those are just two, and then they will also be speaking at the conference at 90-minute workshops. So there's a lot there for organic, and not to mention 170 exhibitors, and I mean, there's
Delicious
just
food,
great food.
hoedowns, dance parties.
Yeah, so it's a really good time, and I think last year we had 34 different states and 11 countries represented there, but the vast majority are from the upper Midwest.
And actually, those two organic universities are kind of part of the same O-Grain thrust as well, the USDA grant that is funding this seminar as well. So similar genetic DNA in those programs. Exactly. We have one last question online, and that is in response, I think, Harriet, to your saying that high seed prices cannot be a reason for not using organic seed. And so the question is, what are organic seed corn prices, maybe as compared to conventional?
Well, actually, a lot of the genetically modified corn is more expensive than organic corn with all the technology fees, depending, how many insecticides they have stacked in there or herbicides they have stacked in there. So it really depends. I mean, you can buy open pollinated varieties, which would not be nearly as expensive as the hybrids. It used to be that organic seed was a lot more expensive than non-organic, but that's not really the case anymore. And it really depends on where you buy it. There are some seed corn companies, like in Indiana, Merit Seeds, they're pretty inexpensive. They're selling mostly to Amish producers, and so they've got pretty reasonable prices. A lot of their varieties are specifically so people can hand harvest them, but because that's what the Amish are doing, right? They're going out with their horses and their wagons and they're picking all the corn by hand. That's something I want to do, but more power to them.
And a real quick follow-up to the price question. We have Ben from Albert Lee Seeds who's going to be coming in about a week and a half. So if you have any questions about seeds, he'll be your guy. So he's coming up.
So the one thing about organic seeds, which is very sad, and we're hoping we can do something about this, is that there was someone from Albert Lee and a few other seed corn companies gave testimony to the National Organic Standards Board in about a year ago, and they stated that at times, not always, but they have been averaging about 20% of the seed that they grow organically in corn, not soybeans, they have to toss away because of because of GMO contamination. Because the soybean, doesn't have as much of a risk, but they're trying to sell 0%. And it's pretty hard to do. Even, no matter how isolated, no matter, the organic producer, grows their seed corn, they plant it a month later than the conventional guy. The weather conditions, it could be cool and wet, and the tasseling happens at the same time, it's like a 10-day period. So that will bring up the cost of organic seed because of that contamination.
Makes sense. You got a question?
I had a quick question on seed carryover. If you had some organic seed corn that you couldn't find organic, so you bought conventional but able to use it as organic, and then happened upon some organic leftovers, and then you have this seed corn leftover that is non-GMO, can you still use that the next year?
Yeah.
Or do you have to say, okay, well, now you
No,
have
you don't
more
have
organic
to throw
available?
away.
Can you repeat that
You don't have to throw away what you already have.
Okay.
You're good. You're good. It's similar to, I didn't even talk about this because it doesn't really affect grain producers so much, but like treated wood. You're not allowed to put treated wood where it's going to have in contact with soil growing organic crops, or in contact with livestock where they might graze under there or whatever, or even rub up against it. But you don't have to tear out all your treated wood posts. It's basically up until the day the organic inspector shows up for the first time, anything that's in place at that point can stay. But if you've got a pile of fence posts that you never put in, and you said, oh, we'll do it tomorrow, it doesn't matter. Too late. Because unless you want to have another inspection, and then you get certified after that date. Basically, once you are certified, no treated wood for replacement or new installation purposes. So it's the same thing with the seed. I mean, if it's okay, you can keep using it. Certifier will just say, keep trying to get, I mean, a long-time organic producer, I can't find 100% organic seeds for all my vegetables. It's always on there on my, please use organic seeds. It's like, well, when there's more available, I will.
So maybe this is a good time to talk about the seed search records that you have to have.
Yeah, so I, as a vegetable grower, I just show them the 6 or 7 catalogs that I work with. The vast majority, some of them are all organic, some of them are somewhat organic. If I showed them that I was only buying from Burpee, which has no organic seeds, they would say, you need to look somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you say I'm buying from Pioneer, well, they don't sell organic seed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not really a valid organic seed search. If you're only buying from a buyer, it doesn't sell them.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
This goes back to like cleaning of equipment, like your combine. Does that same thing, like say you're doing half your farm of conventional crops and the other organic, do you have to like clean your plow before you?
Yeah, so like if you're talking about like the seed boxes on a planter?
The question was do you have to clean combines and trucking and things like that, but so if you're chisel plowing or rotavating, do you have to clean between all those operations as well, between conventional and organic? Cultivation.
Like the plow, cultivation.
Yeah, and that would depend. If it's a muddy, I don't know who's doing cultivation in a muddy field, but it depends. If there's conventional dirt caked on there, yes, you should wash it off. But, if you've gone down the field and, it's been shaking, as it's driving down the field, probably you don't have an issue. But planters are another area. If you're using the same planter for organic and non-organic, the insecticide boxes, you've got to wash it out. If your tractor has saddle tanks where you've been, using conventional fertilizer, you should either empty those. That's what you should do, because they leak a lot. You shouldn't be driving over an organic field with any kind of tank that still is containing something prohibited. So and then if you want to, let's say, spray a foliar feed that had previously had a non-approved substance in it, you can do that. Each certifier has their own method, but most of them prefer that once you use it for an organic use, that it's dedicated organic. And really, the sprayers are not that expensive. Just get a dedicated organic sprayer, and then you don't have to, because cleaning a sprayer, okay, is a lot of work. And you've got all those rubber pieces, and some of the tanks even, are a little bit porous. I don't know anybody's got like a stainless steel tank. And that's the only one that wouldn't be porous. But even those poly ones, you can't get rid of that smell.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say is on the research stations where we do a lot of our trials, we just have very detailed cleaning logs. And so we have the date, what field operation you're doing, who the operator was, how you cleaned it. And so it's oftentimes, I'll even write like, banged it with a shovel, sprayed it with an air compressor. Just so that it is clear for the inspector that we did clean it and there was some effort made to be able to prepare it from a conventional field to an organic field. And that takes 45 seconds to fill out. I just have a folder of them, stack in my backpack, always have, turn them into the inspector at the end.
It's not that bad, and
It's
it's
not.
just, you kind of get, as Harriet said, it's just a routine. You get used to it, and you just realize you have to do it, and the crew realizes they have to do it, and I was kind of scared of it at first, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, so Aaron Silva just said it's not that bad with the paperwork. The other thing too is if let's say it's a spring tillage activity and you're bringing a piece of equipment that had just been in the soil of a field that's just been treated with an herbicide, and you go into your organic field, which doesn't have herbicide-resistant seeds in it, you could have carryover, you're going to have problems, it's going to look pretty bad when the inspector comes and you got, at the edge of the field over here, all these kind of dead or yellowed or sickly looking plants. So it's just better just to be safe rather than sorry.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah.
I have a couple of farms that are very difficult to transition because they're kind of wet and they're rented farms. And so we've been using cereal rye crimping and then no-tilling soybeans, food-grade soybeans, for a number of years. When I turn to the organic status, is that going to be an acceptable rotation, that we have a legume broken by a grass cycle and that we're
But you're growing the each crop year it's soybeans?
Correct.
So this is planting a cereal rye, rolling, crimping that, and planting soybean into that. And so he's doing that on land that he's trying to transition, which is kind of heavy, wet soils. And so he's wondering what that looks like for a certifier.
I think that they might allow like 2 years in a row, but I think they're going to want you to break that. Because think about it, you're really not breaking disease cycles. If you get white mold in that field 1 year, you're just going to have all of that inoculant sitting there, ready to go at it next year. And the whole point of the crop rotation is to use that cultural practice to help you break pests and disease cycles. So I don't know what else you might be able to grow. I mean, maybe you could do some field peas in there. I'm not sure. But just kind of, you'll need it. I mean, there's times when they allow 2 years of the same crop. But typically they won't let you go longer than that.
Okay, so we've been here.
Although it is a soil building rotation, but it's not meeting the pest, disease, and weed breaking of cycle part of the crop rotation mandate.
Except for alfalfa, right?
Yeah, except for perennial crops.
All right, so we've been here for about an hour and a half, which is a good long time. Thank you, Harriet, so much. We have one last clarification, and that's just that they want to be clear that non-treated seeds can be used for organic transition.
Yes, as long as it's not been treated with anything prohibited. And there are, except, I mean, if it's alfalfa or clover, you can use a non-GMO nitrogen-fixing bacteria. That's a treatment, but that's approved because it's natural. Or it could be a clay-coated seed that doesn't have any unapproved binders or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, during the transition, you're not mandated to use organic seed.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Harriet, for sharing. And so for everyone in class online, thank you again for tuning in. Now that we have some ideas how to market, we know how to certify, we know how to transition. Tomorrow is when we begin the more kind of agronomic aspect of organic grain production. We have Mark Kopetsky coming in from Organic Valley.
Good guy.
He's a soils agronomist, a great guy, and was an extension agent for many years for Wisconsin as well. So he has a diverse experience and will be able to give us a lot to think about in terms of soil fertility.
And a certified organic farmer too.
Also certified organic farmer, yep, as almost all of our presenters are. So we also have a thank you from online. Thank you guys. We will see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your days.